his face. But in my eyes, only endless coldness and madness remained. Space, open. This time I wasn't cutting from the outside, nor was I trying to sever his head. Directly inside his indestructible skull, at the very center of his brain protected beneath thick bone, I forcibly created a 1 centimeter cubic space. It existed for only a single instant before collapsing back into nothingness. In less than a billionth of a second, the fundamental law of space completed an entire cycle of creation and destruction. Titan froze. His eyes, his expression, his movements, everything completely froze in place. Then thin streams of bright red blood slowly flowed from his left ear, then from the right ear, then from his nostrils, his eyes, and the corners of his mouth. Crimson lines crawled down his bronze-colored face, forming a horrifying image. In the next second, the mountain-like body of Titan collapsed straight onto the arena floor with a deafening crash. A 4th-tier physical enhancement monster, Scavenger Titan, died instantly, and the entire arena suddenly became silent, as though someone had pressed a mute button on the whole world. The music stopped. The screaming stopped. Every expression froze on the faces of the crowd. Thousands of eyes stared at Titan's gigantic body lying motionless on the arena floor, blood slowly flowing from all 7 openings in his face, before turning toward me standing beside him. No wounds, no real fight, just a single touch. And then a god had fallen. After several seconds of complete silence, a wine glass slipped from the hands of a wealthy businessman in the front row and shattered against the ground. It was like someone had flipped a switch. In the next instant, the entire venue exploded into chaos. Countless spectators screamed, cried, and shoved each other desperately as they tried to escape this place that now felt like hell itself. But I ignored all of it. Slowly, I raised my head and looked through the sea of people toward the luxurious private box at the highest level. My voice was slightly hoarse from my injuries, but it remained cold and clear. 100 fights. Finished. Hand over the 4th-tier Ice Soul Crystal Core. The moment I said that, the crowd hesitated briefly, because they knew I was right. I had completed the 100-man challenge. According to the rules, the reward belonged to me, but it was obvious Boss Gen had no intention of following those rules anymore. He stepped in front of the microphone, and his cold laughter echoed throughout the entire arena through the speakers. 9527, you really surprised me. What a shame. Did you honestly think you could fool everyone with your little hidden tricks? His eyes narrowed dangerously as he continued. Titan's body was tougher than battleship armor, yet he died without a single proper wound. Clearly, you used some kind of cursed technique or forbidden neurotoxin. According to the iron laws of the Shura Arena, challengers who use forbidden methods automatically forfeit their victory. The reward is confiscated. The entire venue instantly erupted again. Everyone immediately understood what was happening. Boss Gen wasn't just targeting the Ice Soul Crystal Core anymore. He wanted my terrifying secret technique, the power capable of ignoring all defenses and killing with a single strike. He wanted everything, including me. Then he smiled like some generous ruler and added, "But I'll give you a chance to live. Hand over your secret technique and I'll spare your life. I'll even make you my most valuable dog." I remained standing silently in the middle of the arena. Slowly, I lifted my head. At that moment, the last bit of respect I still had for their rules completely shattered. I had followed their game. I had risked my life and endured unimaginable pain just to finish the 100-man challenge. And now the owner of the game was telling me, "You won," but I refused to acknowledge it. In that case, there was nothing left to discuss. A faint laugh escaped my lips. That laugh clearly enraged Boss Gen completely because his face twisted instantly as he roared, "Capture him! Dead or alive, I want his secret!" In the next moment, all 8 alloy gates surrounding the octagon cage suddenly rose at the same time. One after another, heavily armed soldiers poured into the arena like a black tidal wave from the darkness. They wore black exoskeleton armor and carried Gauss kinetic rifles, the private army of a massive corporation. Hundreds of gun barrels glowing faintly with blue electricity locked directly onto me. Exactly 100 soldiers, and every single one of them was a battle-hardened veteran. The remaining spectators completely panicked. People smashed against the exits like lunatics because everyone knew who these soldiers were. The cleaners of the Shura Arena. Once they moved, this place would truly become a slaughterhouse. Meanwhile, I stood calmly in the center of the encirclement. Slowly, I released the broken dagger fragment from my hand. Since they refused to follow the rules, then from this point onward, only my rules mattered. Fire! The captain's order echoed through the arena, and instantly hundreds of Gauss rifles erupted at the same time. Alloy bullets tore through the air from every direction, weaving together into a perfect net of death with absolutely no escape. In a single instant, the storm of bullets completely swallowed me whole. Smoke, flames, and deafening explosions erupted everywhere. But after the gunfire finally stopped, I was still standing exactly where I had been before, completely unharmed. Within a 1-meter radius around me, space itself had twisted into a distorted shape, as though I stood inside a warped mirror. Thousands of alloy bullets powerful enough to pierce tanks were now floating motionless in the distorted space around me, like insects trapped inside amber. Their kinetic energy had been forcibly stripped away while the bullets compressed tightly together inside the warped spatial field, grinding endlessly against one another until they slowly began glowing red-hot from friction. Every soldier froze in place. They had seen bulletproof shields before. They had seen energy barriers and even people capable of blocking bullets with their bodies. But this was the first time they had ever seen space itself swallowing an entire hail of bullets alive. But they had never seen anyone stop bullets in midair before. This wasn't defense anymore. It was prohibition itself. Slowly, I raised my hand toward the twisted space where the storm of death floated motionless, then lightly clenched my fingers. Now it's my turn. In the next second, I suddenly swung my arm sideways. The distorted space containing thousands of burning bullets was thrown directly toward the densest formation of soldiers on the left side. At the same moment, space returned to normal. Every bit of kinetic energy I had stripped away was instantly restored all at once. Swish, 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 swish! The arena filled with the horrifying sound of bullets tearing through the air. They returned even faster than when they had been fired, forming a giant fan-shaped curtain of blazing alloy rounds. The frontline soldiers didn't even have time to react. Their exoskeleton armor, bones, flesh, and organs were all pierced apart in a single instant. Then, boom! A massive cloud of crimson mist exploded across the battlefield, dyeing the entire arena bright red. The surviving soldiers immediately descended into madness. Some retreated in terror. Some screamed hysterically. Others desperately threw high-explosive grenades and Molotov cocktails at me, hoping stronger weapons could finally bury me alive. But I didn't even glance at them. The explosions, the flames, the shockwaves, the flying shrapnel, none of it could hurt me. Instead, every bit of destructive force was devoured once more by the warped space surrounding me. My 1 cubic meter space had now become something terrifying, like a tiny unstable star overflowing with violent explosive energy. Then I calmly walked through the sea of flames toward the collapsing formation of soldiers. My eyes locked onto the captain, desperately trying to escape. And then I released my control over space. Boom! All the compressed explosive energy erupted outward at once, forming a gigantic 10-meter-wide sphere of death around me. Flames and destruction swept across every direction. The soldiers directly caught in the blast were instantly vaporized together with their armor. The ones farther away burst into flames from the unbearable heat before being shredded apart by countless pieces of high-speed shrapnel. Even their screams were erased by the explosion itself. This wasn't a fight anymore. It had become a massacre. My spatial ability had turned into the most terrifying mobile armory imaginable. The stronger the enemy's firepower became, the more brutally I returned it back to them. Their numerical advantage, their suppressive firepower. In front of the true law of space, it was all just a joke. Before long, the entire venue was filled only with the sound of burning flames and miserable groans. The captain of the private army, who somehow survived the first explosion, dragged half of his burned body across the floor using his hands and feet as he crawled toward the top floor private box, crying desperately for help. Meanwhile, inside the box, Boss Jen had already collapsed onto the sofa. As he watched the living hell unfolding on the monitors, nothing remained on his face except pure terror. At first, he thought I only possessed some hidden killing technique, but now he finally understood. The thing he had provoked wasn't just a lunatic with secret arts, but a true monster. He immediately turned around and tried to run away, but after only taking 2 steps, a loud crash suddenly came from behind him. The captain of the private army flew through the doorway like a broken sack and rolled all the way to Boss Jen's feet. The man groaned twice, weakly raised a finger toward the door, and then his head tilted sideways as he died completely. Boss Jen stiffly turned around. Through the smoke and dust outside the doorway, I slowly walked in. My entire body was covered in dirt and blood. The once white smiling mask had long since been dyed crimson red, and the eyes beneath it were horrifyingly calm. I didn't waste words. I simply walked toward the special bulletproof glass that was supposedly capable of blocking even armor-piercing rounds, then slowly raised my right hand and pressed my 5 fingers against it. In the next second, black cracks resembling spiderwebs began spreading across the entire surface of the glass from the center of my palm. But those weren't ordinary cracks. Space itself was tearing apart. Boss Jen completely panicked. He screamed for me to stop while frantically mentioning the barrier's military origins. He offered money. He mentioned the Wang family backing him. He promised enormous rewards and desperately begged for his life. But unfortunately for him, all those words were nothing more than meaningless wind passing through my ears. My fingers slowly closed. Then, with a strange dull sound, I ripped out the entire wall section together with the thick bulletproof glass and the half-meter alloy steel structure surrounding it. A perfect circular hole nearly 3 meters wide appeared in the wall. The gigantic section of steel and glass crashed heavily onto the floor, shaking the entire room. Along with it, the final piece of Boss Jen's composure shattered completely. He instantly dropped to his knees and repeatedly smashed his forehead against the ground while crying crying uncontrollably, his face covered in tears and mucus. "Please, I'll give you everything, everything!" The fourth tier Ice Soul crystal core is inside the safe. I grabbed his hair, lifted his entire body off the ground like a sack, and dragged him toward the hidden compartment. After the iris and fingerprint verification finished, the safe slowly opened. An unbearable cold instantly spread through the entire room as Jin tremblingly handed me a dark metal box, raising it above his head with both hands like his life depended on it. I took the box from him and opened it with one hand, and the moment I saw what was inside, even I froze for a second. Resting there was a fist-sized crystal core, unbelievably clear, with an icy storm swirling endlessly inside it. The purity of its freezing energy was so terrifying that even the space power within my body trembled slightly in response. "So it's real," I muttered to myself before immediately storing the Ice Soul crystal core inside my spatial storage. The moment Jin saw that I had taken the item, hope suddenly returned to his eyes. He hurriedly told me that he was from the Wang family of the provincial capital, trying desperately to use his background to save himself. Unfortunately for him, he never got to finish speaking. An invisible blade suddenly sliced through the air, and his voice stopped instantly. His head separated cleanly from his body before rolling across the floor, while blood sprayed violently from his neck and splashed across half of my body. I coldly kicked away the still twitching corpse and said without the slightest emotion, "I don't care who you are. If you don't pull the weeds out by the roots, they'll come back to destroy you someday." That lesson was something I had already learned long ago in the dark alleys of the slums. But even after getting what I came for, I didn't leave immediately. Instead, I walked toward the corner of the wall and destroyed the main gas pipe. High-pressure gas burst out violently and quickly filled the luxurious underground arena. After that, I lit a lighter and casually tossed the tiny flame into the room before turning around and walking away without looking back. A few seconds later, a deafening explosion shook the entire top floor. Blazing fire and an overwhelming shockwave exploded like a raging dragon, devouring the entire underground arena. Steel twisted apart, walls collapsed, and the place that had taken countless lives finally met the destruction it deserved. Meanwhile, with flames and burning heat rising behind me, I slowly climbed the stairs toward the surface. And the moment I pushed open the heavy iron door, the blinding morning sunlight hit my face. I raised my hand and slowly removed the smiling mask stained with dark red blood, revealing a slightly pale yet cold and handsome young face beneath it. "I finally got the Ice Soul crystal core," I whispered quietly. "Next, I have to save my sister. As for the others who owe me, our reckoning will come later." It was already dawn by the time I arrived at the hospital, and my sudden appearance almost shattered the silence of the entire building. The doctor on duty was still half asleep, but the moment I slammed the cold metal case containing the fourth-tier Ice Soul crystal core onto the table, all traces of sleep instantly disappeared from his face. Even his tone changed immediately as he stared at me in shock and said, "A fourth-tier Ice Soul crystal core." Soon the entire special care unit lit up. The best doctors were called in, sterile laboratories were prepared, and an emergency energy dilution and guidance procedure that normally could never begin this quickly was forcefully initiated because of this crystal. I stood silently outside the sterile observation room, staring intensely through the glass at my younger sister, Linnea, lying unconscious on the bed. Streams of melted ice blue energy were slowly transferred into her body through advanced instruments. At first, the life signals on the monitor fluctuated violently, and I could practically hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. But after some time, something finally changed. The deadly frost covering her face slowly disappeared, and little by little, color began returning to her lips again. Her heartbeat, which had once been so weak it was almost undetectable, steadily rose until it finally stabilized at a normal level. One by one, the deafening alarm sounds inside the room stopped, and by the time the first rays of sunlight entered the hallway, the doctor finally removed his mask. Exhaustion was written all over his face, but he still couldn't hide his happiness as he looked at me and said, "We succeeded. Her condition is stable now. She just needs rest to fully recover." The moment I heard those words, it felt like the final support holding up my entire body suddenly disappeared. The fear and pressure I had carried for half a month completely vanished at once, replaced by overwhelming exhaustion crashing into me like a tidal wave. I sat quietly beside my sister's bed, staring at her sleeping face that had finally regained its color, and before I even realized it, my eyes slowly closed. For the first time in a very long while, I finally fell into the calmest and deepest sleep of my life. What I didn't know was that after Linnea's life stabilized, a tiny fragment of the fourth-tier ice energy still remained inside her body. For the complete crystal core, that leftover energy was practically nothing. But for someone at my current level, it was more than enough to trigger a true transformation. Through some mysterious connection between me and my sister, that pure ice energy silently flowed into my body while I slept. I had no idea how much time had passed before I suddenly woke up.
Follow, like, comment,